Okay, welcome back to Voluntarist Academy. This is a very special episode. I tend to try to do these things annually. Maybe it's been a couple of years since I've actually managed to do this. A lot going on. This is the Independence Day special. Yeah, there's a hyphen in that word, believe it or not. And so here, July 4th, 2025, I'm joined by a really just all-star lineup here for a roundtable discussion about the state of freedom currently, some opinions, some truth. We're going to have a really dynamic conversation. And so I'm very honored, I'm very pleased to be joined by this all-star cast, this lineup, these gentlemen, Chris Jantzen, Will Keller, Cory Endrulat, and Logan Hart. From back in the day, the old Hitchhiker's Guide to Truth days. If any of the audience got carried over to Voluntarist Academy, you'll remember each and every one of these guys. They've been on my show multiple times. And so I'm so happy to be joined by them again today. How are you guys doing today? Happy
Doing well.
Independence Day.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here, brother.
Thank you,
Yeah,
man.
good to be here. Thanks for putting this together, James.
Yeah, it's such a last minute too. It's really cool to know that you guys were able to join. There's so many other things that everybody could be choosing to do with their time right now, but I mean, here we are.
Yeah, Will, it's got a lot of background noise, bro.
Oh, Will's outside enjoying the weather.
It's already dark where I am. Where are you? California, I think. Crazy.
So obviously today is July 4th, and that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. I, for one, do not see us in any sort of real condition of freedom. That I don't think is really up for debate. A lot of people would try to debate that, but I think that they would simply just be wrong. And it's really hard for people to cope with that these days. There's a lot of coping going on out there. What do you guys think of the current state of affairs here in at least the United States? And maybe we can stretch it out to more global matters, but we all live in the United States. So let's start here. Who would like to go first?
I will. I've got something that came up for me when you were first introducing when you said some people would argue, and I thought, yeah, that's true that a lot of people have this idea of freedom based on relative freedom, as in there's we're more free than other countries, therefore that means that we're free. But that's not actually the case. If you're in a prison and there's guys in solitary confinement over here, and these other guys can go outside and run around in the yard or whatever, they might be more free, but they're still in a prison and they're not actually living in a state of freedom. So that's the first thing that kind of came to mind just right out of the gate, given the holy day and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I'd start off just by being thankful. A lot of people I've spoken with over the years right away will, if I talk about problem slavery, they'll react emotionally and they'll be like, why don't you, they'll make some drastic statement, right? But it is important to start with being thankful and grateful for being able to move around as much as I can and having the freedoms, what people generally call that we do have in the place that we live. For instance, I can own weapons. A lot of people in the world can't do that, or it's very dangerous. For me, it's relatively not very dangerous to own weapons, and so that's a pretty big deal to be able to practice self-defense if I want to be able to express myself online if I want to. So maybe a good place to start for a lot of folks is to be thankful for what we got. But let's not lie to ourselves. That's not freedom. And that's where this conversation gets tricky. And it only is freedom because people have been calling that. And that's what I would call a facade. Like when you look at the new little shopping mall going up and they put the big fancy sharp points on the top with like the western front, and then you look around the back and it's just the front of a building and it's not really, there's no essence to it. Well, that's the level of freedom that that we're at compared to what it could be. And so I'm not saying I'm not thankful for what I got, but those of us that can be speaking up should be speaking up, because not only is it not what it could be, but the situation seems to be getting worse, and likelihood of logic and reasoning says that it's going to get worse based on what we're seeing. But I'd love to hear what Cory has to say about it. Where are you at, Cory? Florida, right? Want to
Yes.
start? Okay.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of constitutional conservatives here, people who say they care a lot about freedom, liberty, and property ownership, a lot of things that you guys go into detail with in your works. You define it, you're looking at all the little bits and pieces. And I went to, a college campus locally, and I asked college students, I said, "Are you free?" And many of them didn't know really how to define freedom. They all had different varying ways of defining it. So going back to what Logan said, seems as if it's a little relative just in the definition alone. People said it's not some like objective thing and that it really depends on what you mean by freedom. But I was asking, I was like, well, are you free? Do you feel free? They were speaking on other people's behalfs. They were speaking on some sort of general idea, but I was asking them personally, do they feel free? Right. And so that's just something I wanted to put out there. And, it's very interesting observing people's responses. And I've been trying to do a lot more of that lately. But the way I see it, based on reflecting on a lot of those interviews and looking at your guys' works and then studying, of course, the abolitionist history, not just the American founding fathers, freedom is something that is more important than anything, right? It's more important than property and life, because if you aren't free, you can't really have property, you can't really have a life to live. And so the abolitionists, were willing to go to jail for their beliefs. The founding fathers were willing to, stand up to some strongest army in the world for their beliefs, and nothing would stop them because of the passion and the inspiration that they had. And if I were to similarly ask a lot of college students about purpose and about passion and about what inspires them, I'm sure there's something that gets them going every single day, but is one of those things freedom? Is that something that they care about, or does it take something big in the world? Let's say what happened in the previous years, or 2008, a big collapse, or 2001, a situation in the world for people to start to actually pay attention. Because of all the people that I've interviewed as well, people who go 50 years in their life, they have some life experience, former cops or whatever, they tell me, it's these events that really broke them, or it's because of the trauma they had to go through, all the experiences. Can we learn before we get those experiences, before we get hurt? And that is my question rather to the audience, because if you're truly free, is this something that are you going to be in a world where you feel like you have to be stuck in your home, where you feel like you have to be stuck by certain mandates? Because then you're not really free, right? Because you can't choose how to live your own life. So these things are going to happen. These events are going to happen again and again, and people are going to question what is freedom in those moments. But if they start questioning it more, they'll realize this is a pattern of history, divide and conquer, Hegelian dialectic, different strategies that have been employed on the populace to keep people essentially enslaved. And freedom has to come from internally. It has to come from an individual saying, "Hey, I want to control my own life, and maybe I have to grow some own food. Maybe I have to, take more control of other things that are going in my life. I don't take control of everything, but I just have to understand the basic premises that I own myself, that I control myself, and that I don't control other people. I don't own, what they own." And it's a very basic concept. Some people may call us, people on the panel here, like utopian for wanting us to be free. But this is the same arguments that the pro-slavery advocates in the 1800s were saying against the abolitionists, saying, "Whoa, you want the slave to be free? Well, you're chaotic, and George Fitzhugh, leading pro-slavery advocate, said Jefferson was the basically the architect of ruin, the inaugurator of anarchy." So he claimed that Jefferson was basically this person who is introducing all these fallacious ideas. He said freedom is an illusion. It's something that people want, but in truth, we always need government. We always need slavery. And he said directly, government is slavery. right? So when you see it in their own words and you look at the abolitionists and you see the passion, the care, and how they want to invite everybody, and they're creating underground railroad towns and they're showing people a better way, that right there is freedom, and it's in action. It's in showing it.
Well
You raise an
said.
interesting point there. You really do, because it is, well, the bombs are bursting in air down the street
I
right
hear it too.
now as we speak. But the rockets, red glare, and all that great stuff is going on in my neighborhood right now. So I'm trying my best to stay on track here. What got me thinking about what you got me thinking about, Corey, is the so-called Age of Enlightenment that we had between I think I have a book here that gives a date, 1680 through 1790.
Hmm.
And that I haven't got to the end of the book, all right, but something tells me that those dates imply that the Enlightenment ended, that this Age of Enlightenment came to an end. I
Hmm.
don't see it that way. I see that the 19th century abolitionists, people, from a lot of them from Massachusetts, notable ones from Massachusetts, were an extension of the Enlightenment. And then you even have individuals throughout the 20th century and even up to now. I don't think the Enlightenment ever ended. And the people that were, arguing against the abolitionists, I don't know, what do you call them? Like, they the slave masters. They want to continue that stuff. And
Hmm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
All the institutions were with the pro-slavery advocates, just to remind everybody, Aristotle, Plato thought it was a natural way of life. They did never questioned the legitimacy, the morality of slavery. These are some of the world's most renowned philosophers. So to expect a big leap in progress among, what we call civil rights, or, equal rights and human rights, or natural law or natural rights, it's profound. And yeah, the Enlightenment doesn't stop. Otherwise, why are we doing this? I think it's because we became enlightened ourselves by reaching new information and saying, whoa, this shifted my whole worldview. And it's not to say like, oh, we're morally superior, we have the high. No, it's to say like we saw a shift in ourselves. We saw perhaps our own past traumas. We saw the past lies that we told ourselves. We saw the programming that was in our school system, which is government ran. And we simply said, hey, if truth is self-evident, as the founding fathers said, if freedom is self-evident, if self-ownership, this is something I can understand no matter where I live, no matter what constitution there is, no matter what is written down, no matter who's in office, then this is it. It's right here. It's right in front of us. We don't need some declaration for it, or some rebellion necessarily, but we simply need to understand it and then act on it. That's why I said freedom and action is really what matters here, because also when people see it, they're like, wow, I want to live that life. A life where maybe I'm less dependent on the grocery store or the government or whatever services that are provided for free, quote unquote, or it always comes at a cost when it comes from the government. Their services are not free, and the government is always going to be there as a sort of protector figure, as a mommy or daddy figure, to basically wrap you in and pull you in. And this has been happening for thousands of years. So the abolitionists challenging chattel slavery and then challenging the government, that was just natural. And the pro-slavery advocates using the government as an excuse for slavery and vice versa, that was just expected as well, because these institutions go hand in hand together. You will never find a government in history that wasn't attached to slavery. So that means when people say government came together and people came together, they voluntary association, and they're like, yeah, I want to create a government. Like that never happened. It always happened after war, conquest, jailing systems, bringing people into certain territories, enslaving them. There was no such thing as a government founded on peace or fair cooperation. And that is something that I think a lot of people are going to be offended to hear about, because many people have ideas of freedom of we got to return to the Constitution, or we got to uphold these ideas and use a certain system. But it's not going to work like that. It's simply not.
Well, it's an
What do you
interesting
other guys
idea
think about
to
this?
it's an
Go ahead,
interesting
Logan.
idea to contemplate, because if you're talking about, let's say, the American government, the idea may have started as a act of rebellion which some may call violent, but I would actually call peaceful, because saying no to tyranny is not violence. It is actually, sometimes you have to use force to restore peace. So that's a bit of a mind fuck for some people to wrap their heads around understanding that. But so that's all well and good and justified and righteous even. But then the moment that they were to achieve that state of freedom and peace after the threat had been neutralized, and then they turn around and say, okay, now we're the government, then it just starts the process all over again. Even if you have a Bill of Rights and a democracy and a republic and all these kind of things, it doesn't matter. It's the fundamental factor of what makes government what it is violence. And the moment you get rid of that, it's just not government anymore. No matter what kind of form, no matter how many people you spread the power among, any of those things they are not what is definitive of what government actually is. But just observing the irony of thinking that even like the American government started out with this idea of peace, that may have been, but the moment the actual Declaration of Independence and all of those statist documents declaring we're the authorities now, well, what kind of authority are we talking about here? Just people who are leaders and make decisions, that's one thing. But when no one else is allowed to do anything without this authority, and then they'll use violence against anyone who tries, that's a problem,
Yeah.
And ultimately, what we're talking about is bigger than a government. That's one term that describes one way of enslaving people, one technique of manipulation. The bigger problem ultimately has to do with people's belief systems and not having the initiative to guide and control that balance of faith and trust in the life, initiative, and logic in a way that we're discovering for ourselves what truth is and communicating that with our community, right? And so because there's been so many generations of this not being done, it's a completely foreign concept. And I always think back to the episode I did with Leslie Powers on Finding Nemo. It's, to me, just the best allegorical description of the situation I see here, where we start talking about freedom and it feels like already right away that there's going to be a 90 some percent of the public that are not using the term to mean the same thing that we mean. And in Finding Nemo came from the ocean. And can you imagine the level of freedom you'd have being a fish born in the ocean to the level of freedom you'd have if you were born inside of a tank, inside of a fish store? And that's what all the other fish in the tank had lived their whole life. They'd never seen the ocean. So Nemo shows up talking about the ocean is like us trying to talk about freedom. And the other fish that grew up in the fish tank their whole life, that's the belief systems, right? And it's not just government. It could be the religion that your parents, it's actually a combination of a bunch of weird stuff conglomerated together, been flashed into our heads with movies and television and music and all kinds of intensive levels of layers of this stuff, along with all of the pain and trauma of all these generations that are like getting covered up with these layers of beliefs and authoritarian ideas and pushing people around. And so we find ourselves in this huge ball of humanity's trauma, dealing with our emotions and all these problems we've created by never being able to be in the ocean, by never actually experiencing it. So when we start talking about it, it's confusing because all of us, nor our parents, nor their parents, have really, really ever felt what it would actually feel like to have freedom, because there's always been some level of control going on as far back as most of us can remember experience, with weird small little examples we can find of people that have managed to find some semblance of cooperation rather than authoritarian belief system that people don't own their own body, that other people can do that. We could just switch that around anytime. And all of a sudden, like Larkin Rose says, you know, this dangerous superstition takes over, and one human thinks that they can make decisions for another one or a group of them or hundreds and thousands of them, and it's just working out terrible.
You know,
Looks like
Chris, that bit about Finding Nemo, it's almost like you're describing Plato's allegory of the cave. So that's some really, really clever insight into that movie. And I'd like to go back and watch that again to see if I can relate to your finding there. We got Will back. Hey Will, how are you? Okay, maybe we don't. I can't tell. Anyways, we're working on getting Will
He's got
Keller
a
back
very
into the chat.
serious look on his face.
He's very serious.
think
He's frozen in time. So something that's been on my mind a lot in recent months is the thought of anarchism being simply just a condition. Like we have a condition of slavery, you know, call it what it is. All of us here understand this. What do you guys think about this condition of anarchism being just a condition, and the actions that are necessary to bring on that condition of real anarchism? What do you guys think needs to be done to get there?
Should I go first again?
Sure.
So this is definitely a big topic, and I used the word anarchy before from George Fitzhugh, who attacked Jefferson using that term, right? So it's been used as an attack. It's been used for media, right? You see the A and the O, which originally apparently stood for anarchy and order, perhaps. Maybe the exact opposite of what people think of it as chaos. There's a lot of historic origins of it. You know, I talk about Taoism, and some of the Taoists are considered the first anarchists, but they never used the term. Abolitionist in history were technically the first anarchists, I would say, in 1833, around 1840, before Proudhon and others in the later 1800s. But either way, they all had this conception of anarchy that was very different, and they were called anarchists, although through different means. Like sometimes they were called no governmentists, and they kind of give a whole different point of view on that, which is very interesting to me. And I encourage people to look into it. I mean, even Thomas Paine and Henry David Thoreau had quotes talking about how America had basically no government in its foundation. We're talking about the American Revolution, right? They were actually surprised to find order in places like Massachusetts that didn't have a government for a number of years. And there's quotes that I have shared in some of my works about that. So I find that interesting because, you know, they're like, well, that kind of puts a lot of our ideas on its head, thinking that perhaps freedom is this, you know, law of the jungle, survival of the fittest, as some people postulate, coming from like Thomas Hobbes. But yet this term survival of the fittest originates with Herbert Spencer, who actually was an anarchist, who was a polymath, who was sharing all sorts of ideas in his book, Social Statics. Incredible work. So you can dive into this and it's like, wait, there's a whole new world that we aren't taught about. And people believe that it's maybe not chaos and that it's actually order, and that it doesn't mean no rules, it just means no rulers. Right. So, how do we get to that point is the question. And all those individuals were talking about moral enlightenment. They were talking about consciousness. They were talking about spirituality. They were talking about defining, you know, rights and what you guys talk about with natural law and freedom, like getting really clear on the concepts and then decentralizing. And maybe when it came to the Taoists, it meant, you know, purifying one's life, alchemy, or whatever. But that's not in the political realm. And if you notice how Larkin Rose talks about anarchy, or the book The End of All Evil talks about anarchy, they say it doesn't exist. They say anarchy is basically just reality. So there's no real such thing as anarchy. And if we're saying that we are meant to be free and that we own ourselves, then there really isn't this concept of anarchy, right? It's sort of just a label that we put on perhaps reality to differentiate it from what we have now. But again, breaking it down from the roots, anarchon means no ruler, monarchon means one ruler, and you can go on, with different types of government. But that's I wanted to create as a pretext for what you guys have to share, because I'm sure you guys can go deeper into some of the solutions. I'm doing my best in my part in my town, local community, to gather people together, do local events, show by example, and people love it. We're already starting to demonstrate freedom by growing food together. I have investors, we're building things, and I'm documenting the whole process, working on all sorts of projects every day, simply sharing my freedom. But never once do I say, oh, well, you have to go to some, voting booth and write down a name on a piece of paper and boom, you're free. Boom, that's how you get your freedom. Or you got to change some law and externalize and say, these people are the solution. Never do I say that's the solution. I say, we got to come together. We got to stand our freedom. We got to understand what it is, show by example, inspire others, have a good time while doing it. And I believe it is absolutely possible. And that's how the abolitionists did it. Civil disobedience, nonviolent resistance, the most powerful strategies in history. Just saying no, standing on our humanity. It's not anarchism, it's just humanity. And that's what the abolitionists said when they were attacked with that word. They said, hey, we're just doing what's right. That's it.
Nicely said, Cory. We got Will Keller back, I believe, hopefully.
Testing, coming in.
There he is. What's going on, Will?
All right, I hope I'm coming in loud and clear.
Well, you are, and we've been having a really great conversation. I wanted to hear from you. I'll give you the question again because I'm not sure you heard it. I'm wondering about anarchism being simply a condition, much like the condition of slavery that we have. The opposite would be a condition of anarchism. And what are the sets of actions that we could be taking in order to achieve that condition of anarchism?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Even not just achieve it, but to maintain it as well.
For sure. That's a really good clarification as well. Well, first, I mean, having an accurate perception of the problem itself and not just the symptoms or, the black-pilled attributes of, what's going on in the world. I mean, this is what sends someone into a spiral of depression because of so much fucked up shit going on in the world, right? You need to understand why that is happening and why is it continuing to happen. And you need to educate yourself and you will come to the most fundamental aspects of reality, and that is the behavior and actions that human beings take. What are they actually performing? What are they supporting and condoning? And this is very easily observed in reality. Just look at, the holy day of today. People are waving their flags, but it's such a facade and an illusion. You could walk down the street and ask anyone, give me a definition of a right. What is true freedom? How do we get to true freedom and how do we maintain it? You're not going to hear anything about objective morality, aligning one's thoughts, emotions, and actions. The belief in human authority is completely illusory. You're not going to hear this kind of stuff. That's because there is a lack of information and knowledge. So just as many of us talk about the law of freedom, which is a quantifiable and qualitative aspect of achieving a certain result, but also maintaining it. And that means that individuals comprising the whole need to understand what morality is, meaning the difference between right and wrong, right? And have to be functioning within that capacity at the same time. So for me to even step onto the path of going the right direction, right, there has to be numbers involved, meaning individuals first and foremost need to understand rights and morality, right? So this is kind of the whole objective of doing the one great work. The one great work is simply contribution. What are you doing towards the goal of achieving anarchy, achieving true freedom? Cory's doing one thing, fantastic. James doing is doing his thing, Chris, Logan, etc. It's all about contribution, participation, and being active. And with those causal factors in mind. So it's definitely twofold. It's knowledge-based and action-based.
Nicely said, Will. Brilliant.
Yeah, I wanted to add a few things as well. First, it's very interesting what Cory was talking about of the idea that anarchy isn't really a thing. It's more like the absence of violence really is what it is. I kind of think of it almost like silence is the absence of sound. You know, it's the default state when there's no violent activity, you know. So that's getting into a very metaphysical type of realm of consideration, just because it's almost like it you know, is nothing something or nothing, you know, is zero a number, you know, this kind of thing. Like, you could argue both sides, but yeah. Getting back to the main question as far as making progress in this department, of course, the true singular answer is knowing it for yourself objectively, based in truth, and sharing that with others. And that's been spoken about extensively for good reason. It is the one correct answer, but I would like to offer a little bit more nuance and peripheral aspects to this, because there's another problem at play here besides ignorance. Ignorance is a big part of it, and many people, like myself, for example, when I first was exposed to these ideas, this philosophy, there wasn't a lot of resistance from me. My initial reaction was like shock that I'd never heard this before, and how much sense that it actually made, and just the, you know, how absent it was in normal education or everyday conversation among people, right? But there's a lot of people that have a very different response to it, because as rare as that is, as far as like even coming across the information, and to be able to just, it clicks and you accept it and you start, there's still going to be a process of rewiring your brain. I mean, for me, it took a couple of years to really like integrate it and weed out all of the contradictions and inconsistencies in my own belief system and everything like that. But alternatively, people like us are going around in the world and sharing this information and directly telling people, i.e., exposing them to these ideas, and they're hearing it and saying, fuck you, I reject it, I don't want any part of it. So that's a different problem. Education alone isn't the only solution, because I don't know how many people as a percentage, but maybe a majority, but at least a very substantial portion of people would just reject it outright if exposed to it. So with that has to come a large amount of shadow work or healing, or I mean, however you want to say it. Shadow work gets thrown around a lot. It's almost a little bit a meme at this point, but not that it's not true or a good term or anything like that. But I mean, there's a lot of people that speak endlessly about shadow work, yet the lack of the evidence that they're not actually doing it is written all over their behaviors, the way they speak to other people, the way they, you know, some of the beliefs that they hold. So, I mean, to me, that's almost a bigger problem, that you can't even get to the education stage if people aren't able to be educated, if they're not teachable, if they're not open to that information to begin with. In my presentation, the trivium hacking mind control, I talk about how healing and truth have to come hand in hand. It's almost like you need a left foot and then a right foot to walk. Otherwise, you're wobbling, you're hopping, you're staggering around. You need truth and then healing, and then truth and then healing, because the healing part opens you up to accept the truth when you hear it. But then the truth itself is healing as well, because it acts as that sledgehammer, breaking through those layers of calcified bullshit, indoctrination, and just beliefs that are held to protect those, the shadow and the wounding, that it's all kind of part of the same thing, is what I'm saying. Like, it's not just that people were brainwashed, it's that they've latched on to bad ideas to protect from their own healing, right? These ideas are like enabling them to not do that work, because it's like being in a safe place. It's like, just putting a band-aid on it, or something. It's like, it's not actually healing, it's just protecting it from agitation. But that's just it, is you're not going to heal if you don't actually, like, dig the tweezers in that wound, and it's going to hurt like hell, but you've got to pull that bullet out. You know what I mean? So
For
anyway, just the big picture that I'm trying to make is just healing has to come with it. And I think another part that has to be touched on is, because people are just as resistant to healing as they are the truth itself. So what is that it factor? I don't exactly know. I've thought a lot about this, and I think the last line of it is, when people have had enough suffering, they'll either run all the way off that cliff and just plummet to their own doom, rather than face the truth. And many people, unfortunately, would go that far. No amount of anything is going to change. They're just fucked beyond repair. And I mean, that's a brutal, harsh truth, but I believe that is the case. When somebody's been so inculcated from day one of life here on the plantation, there's just no coming back from it. Sometimes it just depends on the person, depends on their own, like, spirit and like capacity for those things. But for the people that there is a chance for, it's still going to be the most difficult, hardest road, rather than just going, like, seeing the light, seeing the value, and moving towards that because you actually care. Your heart is online enough to move you in that direction. Is, at least, I guess it's kind of the satanic aspect of self-preservation, is, when I'm suffering long enough, then I'll, ask the question, maybe there's a better way. What can we do differently, because I can't take this anymore. So I'll leave it there. I know that was kind of a rant, but
I love that you said foobar, because I remember in the link when James hit us up and he's like, hey, you guys want to talk about the state of freedom? What do you guys think about the state of freedom? I typed in foobar. It's screwed beyond all recognition, and that can be sad. It can be black pilled. And I see why people start looking at certain stuff and they just turn away. It's too painful to even look at. And maybe I've often thought maybe that reaction occurs in a psychological, subconscious way to keep some people from even consciously looking at a thing, before they give themselves that opportunity, and that's partly why they can't see stuff in the first place. So, but, harkening back to, you're asking about the definition of anarchy. I love how Cory and Logan answered that, especially because to me, I've always thought about, like, mathematics of the situation here. Government was a technology of way of governing people. It's an invention, it's an invention. It's a human invention. It didn't exist before humans invented it. And so before it got invented, then what did we have? Like, I love that you said default condition, but yeah, so that's anarchy. But, we just did an episode with the One Great Work Warriors about hopium, high on hopium. And I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the balance between hopium and hope. The reason I love this book so much The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. And I based my whole podcast on it is because it does really bring a lot of hope. It points out that this is just a matter of time till freedom emerges. He said, never in all of history have the elements been arrayed against the evil manifest in tyranny and slavery as they are today. The dreams that born in the hearts of billions have been growing stronger through the millennia. The children of this world are owed a liberty from slavery that few are able to comprehend. This is the most exciting era in all of human history. It is the dawn of freedom of mankind. So, like when you look at the bigger picture, it doesn't matter how much concrete you put, eventually nature's going to bust through, and it could be a long time. It could be a lot of concrete. And that's what we're dealing with. Like I said, layers of BS, generations, right? And so we might have to go through a lot of struggles. But the trouble with that question is where it comes from is this is what people always want to demand of us when we talk about the concept of anarchy, of no rulers. They say, well, how are we going to get from here to there? It's like, I'm nervous about it. This doesn't seem possible, and so I'm not really on board with the principle that you're describing here because it looks like it's not going to be a safe journey for me, and that's the emotion. That's the heart of that question, that why it hits us so much, because people don't want to get on board of an idea that's not going to work out good for them. I'm going to get on the Trump shit. At least, he might be crazy, but they got a lot of guns. I'm going to go with the big gang. They got all the weaponry. I hate to say it, but you guys are screwed. You're outnumbered. And so it's like, what do principles mean then? If we're choosing something from our heart because it's it's because what the creator wants, then it's not about like what's going to work out best for me and my family in the next few years or the next generation of humans. It might come out terrible for a while if we do the right thing. Think about if you shake up a bottle and then you open it. Yeah, it's going to spray everywhere. But I mean, you got to do something. You got the bottle. It's all, it's like maybe we could do it in a calm way and let the steam out little by little if we realize what was going on. But in order to do that, we'd have to be able to communicate. But we're all too emotionally we'd have to have teams working together. And mutual aid society type of things. All these things people are working on and minds are churning on, but ultimately it's a decision and it's in every one of us. And the reason I wrote my new book that I'm excited to share, the book that changed my life, is I'm trying to inspire each individual to be motivated within yourself to become that being that you can be proud of. It doesn't matter what happens. The happening is you taking the steps in the direction that make you a whole being, that make you proud of being what you are, that you're taking a good use of this amazing ability you have to drive the most amazing technology in all of the universe that you're living in right now. You're in the driver's seat of the most amazing and awesome vehicle that's ever been created, the newest human technology, and you're on board. You're in the driver's seat. And so are you going to just follow some scripts? Are you going to just go down some codes? Are you going to do what you're told? Or are you going to create from your heart, connect with the divine source and burst out something amazing and beautiful that's never been done before? That's up to you. And you have that opportunity. So my thing is try to inspire, try to motivate, try to inspire and motivate yourself. It's not based on the outcome. It's not based on, are we going to be able to do it next week or in a few years while I'm still alive? No, it's based on you're doing it because you want to have a beautiful heart and you want to live this life like you mean it. And this is your opportunity that the universe gave you. And so that's my gift to people, is to let them know about that, because otherwise you're missing a golden opportunity. And that's sad. You want to be part of it or you want to watch it go by. It's going to happen one way or another. Yeah.
Great points all around, for real. I'd like to bring up the Sumerian word for freedom is Ama'agi or Ama'agi. I'm not sure of the pronunciation, but it's spelled AMA-GI. And they had to invent this word because they were put into bondage. So yes, freedom is the default. Yes. They had to, because it was taken away from them. They had to go, what was that thing we had? Oh yeah, we have to call it something now. The law of identification through communication we are able to use our voices to identify things and communicate with one another, so that way we can all reason. We can use our innate reasoning abilities to come to an understanding and use that logic to set a goal and get back to that place that we used to be at. That's what I largely think about it. When I think about the question I asked about how do we get to a condition of anarchism, that's what my channel is all about. Voluntarism is the set of actions that's necessary in order to achieve a state of condition of anarchism. This is largely based on the right action ethic that Richard Wetherill put forward. Voluntarism is a term coined, largely attributed to a man named Auburn Herbert. That's like the earliest known, usage of the term voluntarism back in the very late 19th, early 20th century. So to continue off of what I think some of you guys were saying, what I think about what some of you guys were saying rather is that what we're supposed to achieve as both learners and teachers is I think that we're supposed to inspire people to break out of the mindset of fear, because that's usually what people fall under when they think about life without government. They get afraid, I hate to sound so arrogant, but whether they even know that's what they're feeling or not, they largely feel fear deep down in their subconscious. Oh, I can't do that. That's not for me. Oh, I'm dependent upon this system. And breaking out of that mindset of fear can be pretty, challenging. But that's the goal, because without fear, there's only love. And with love, that's an incredible mechanism, a vehicle for freedom and achieving just awesome things. I went to Porkfest a couple weeks ago up here in New Hampshire. I got to meet Ross Ulbricht. I got to shake his hand and congratulate him on his victory of getting out. It was, the system put him in there. The system got him out. It's just sheer fact of the matter. And so I heard him speak there, and what he said in his speech, there was a lot of storytelling, but there was something that really really got to me. He spoke about desperation. He said that, in his most desperate hour, he had to find a way to put the desperation down, because he realized that, and I'm paraphrasing here, he realized that his mindset of desperation was going to prevent him from achieving his goal of getting out of prison. It would have made his anxiety and tension, all that stuff would have been really super high. And he would have been very short-tempered with the people that were helping him out. That desperation drives people to do crazy things and to act crazy ways. And I completely agree with that. So what he went on to say was, when he learned how to put the desperation down, he achieved kind of this inner peace. And it made him think that so long as he was free in his heart and free in his mind, they can't take that. They can put his body in a cage, but they can't take him being free in his heart and free in his mind. And to achieve that, he had to learn to put the desperation down. So what, I don't know if there's really a question there, or if I'm just continuing the conversation. If any of you want to, take it from there,
Good points,
please,
man.
by all means.
I thought that was fantastic. You've made a lot of really good points. You mentioned desperation. What came to mind for me was also scarcity. When I talk about permaculture, which is one of the ideas heavily associated with voluntarism, and there's an increasing amount of books now coming out connecting voluntarism with permaculture, because it's an ethics-based system. It's not just a way of growing food. They're basically aligned one-to-one, and gardeners don't see it, and people who study philosophy on voluntarism side don't see it. So there's a gap being built there, just between, same thing with agorism and abolitionism. Like, there's a bunch of ideas that happen to coincide because they all just care about freedom, and that's a beautiful thing. That there's so many of these ideas coming to light and people finding new ways to express that, right? And of course, I've been very experimental with a lot of that as well. One of the projects I have, you mentioned truth and health being a core thing together. Absolutely. I have a project called Health Revealed with Leslie Powers. Chris, you probably know that. And it's a fantastic project with hundreds of researchers and psychologists and people who study human behavior. And one thing you mentioned, you were at PorcFest. I want to ask you how inspiring that was for you, because it inspires me when I see community come together, when I see the solutions being enacted, when I see people just having these conversations, and new people and people who have never had it before, questioned it, or thought they were all alone. And I happen to bring them together to these events. And every single event, we have somebody who's new, and we have new speakers, and people are just bringing material. It's like happening on its own at this point. Seymour Saracen, who's a leading community psychologist, said that this is the basis of what he calls the anarchist principle, which is community. And community is so important for health, right? People are looking for community. One of the reasons why they don't want to rebel in the sense of what we're talking about, not rebel as in like I want attention or whatever, and rebel in the sense of just saying no and standing on their freedom, is because they're afraid of their peers. They're afraid of what the people around them are going to think and say. And maybe they don't know about some of the concepts, but deep down in their heart, like you were mentioning, they do. They know that violence is wrong. They don't need to be taught objective morality. They need a quick look in the mirror to see their own shadows, their own traumas. They need to do the inner work. And, maybe some people are really lost because they were in, prison systems, and maybe they do need to be taught a little bit of moral ethics and morality, right? But the vast majority of people know the basics that violence is wrong. They simply have contradictions and hypocrisies through the superstition of statism, right? And that's a mental problem here. It's a social psychopathology, which people like who is it that did the hierarchy of needs? Maslow, Abraham Maslow said if we want to evolve beyond self-actualization, we actually have to understand this term anarchy. He said this directly in his book. And yet, where are the psychologists talking about it? Carl Jung said it's state slavery, and that to get out of it, we have to do, he is associated with shadow work, basically, a lot of his works. So here you have a bunch of people who study human behavior, study the mind, look at things deeper, and they're all pointing toward this like different idea of freedom, which is beyond political ideology, beyond collectivism, and looking at how can we heal the individual. And being that I started my whole channel with nutrition and health, and that was my passion that led me down this way, I see this big convergence of medical people who are leaving the system, going toward freedom, and all these people because they realize again that freedom is the most important thing, but it is also so healing for people. So when you provide an environment that inspires them, that heals them, you give them food that heals them, that inspires them, you can walk them through a food forest, their mind is open to anything, and I mean anything. So it is amazing because you know what? It's wu-wei with the plants just as it is with people. The Taoist principle of letting things be. Like Logan was like, it's kind of ironic because we're pushing nothing. Well, that's just why the Taoists were considered anarchists. It's like they have the yin and the yang, and the yin is just like nothingness, but it's like, how do we practice this yin energy, this feminine energy when we live in a very masculine, like we got to create action, we got to change system type of world? Maybe the change doesn't need to happen. Maybe we need to learn how to, okay, maybe we're changing too much. Maybe we're thinking too much. Maybe we're in the future too much. What's going to happen to my family? What's going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to this system? In the past, we got to go return to the American Constitution when, the premises of Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism is you got to be present, right? So there is a connection here, huge, between spirituality, health, and freedom that cannot be ignored. And it's seen in all disciplines. It's even seen in anthropology, right, with different works. But we have to see each other as humanity. And that I would say is my core message. And hopefully this, helps steer the conversation more, James, because I think if we all treat each other as humanity, we don't look at each other as like, oh, these people are sheeple, or these people are uninformed, these people need to wake up. If we start to treat them as our fellow men and brothers, sisters and people that need to heal with us, and on the same journey, and that we came across this information, we didn't expect it. I think there's a great humility in that that can really open up a lot of people to the information that we have.
Hey, one thing before someone else takes the conch. Amaji translates to returning to mother. All right, so
Wow.
that ancient Sumerian word that they invented to come up with like what was lost, we say freedom, it actually translates to returning to mother.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
I wanted to make sure I got that in there because there's going to be some people that hear this.
I would
they're
love to
gonna be
learn
like,
more about the Sumerian slaves and some of the stuff they did back then. And I was only looking at the 1800s. Like,
I mean,
I'm
they
sure if you go
understood it
back
as like,
then,
they understood, debt as slavery,
oh yes,
like, and we still like that's largely lost today. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight was the debt slavery that's going on with all the taxation. Like taxation is not only theft, it's fucking slavery. And people don't even realize it. They don't make the connection. Like the wires just can't cross that way in their heads. Like they do not understand it that way. And you
well,
see like Twitter posts and Facebook posts all day long today on Independence Day about how we've went to war over 2% taxation and like today it's 40% and no one's doing shit. And it's like, okay, hold on quick. And I always do every year. I find myself being like, you guys don't understand. It wasn't just about taxation. It was about the implication that came with it of slavery. The people understood that taxation equals slavery. What was going on back then with the British East India Company and what England was doing over in India with all the like they equated it to slavery. So that's what they went to war over. They saw taxation without representation as a form of slavery. Boom. So sorry to derail, but anyways.
no, you're good. Frederick Douglass said it himself, so it's all there.
I think we're all still on the same train here. I mean, it 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 gets me to thinking. I'm glad you said, when I was talking last about Plato's cave, because there's this concept of this tunnel, right? And I was talking about Nemo. Nemo goes through this tunnel too. And then Plato's cave, you got this tunnel. And then you got like the movie The Matrix, right before Neo wakes up, he goes through this tunnel and he pops out of this, in this pod, right? And I feel like the process that we have to go through is a difficult one because of the matrix of the reality. The context of the situation is very illusory, like we keep using these words, the illusion, the facade, the belief system, right? We're in it, right? And a realization something is that you don't necessarily see coming, or the whole idea of a realization, or is that you didn't know it before you realized it, right? And so that gives me one more good. I'm the allegory story guy. Just one more thing to share is I love the movie Shawshank Redemption. It has so many great quotes in it, get busy living or get busy dying, and that feeds right into what Cory was just saying about living in the moment. We got to be in the moment. It's about your experience and your choice process, right? And his quote, the other quote from the movie is, "The salvation lies within." And that was because, he had the rock hammer in the Bible, and the prison warden was always going around preaching the Bible. And, the fact that he had a Bible kind of kept him in the good graces of the warden. And that was how he escaped from the prison. And so to escape from this prison that we're in of authoritarianism, it's a very personal journey. And it involves going through a dark tunnel of the self and re-questioning things, re-realizing who you are, and doing a thing because you need to do the thing more than you need to live itself. And all these great stories and movies we watch, the heroes are the ones that will risk everything for principle. And that's the core of what, I really want to inspire people with. And if you walk away from hearing me talk, I hope it leaves you feeling motivated and inspired that, grab a hold of the moment, seize the day. I love that, Cory. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank
And
you.
Chris, just to add to your point about Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne had to crawl through a tunnel of shit to get to freedom.
Yeah. And by the way, I do want to say the nuance on this is like, We're not here to be like, again, like, oh, I'm here, I'm freedom, like I'm a superhero now and I need attention all over social media. There's the flip side to it. People will get too heroic, too high on their horse. But yes, absolutely, people should be inspired and have passion. Like you read that book, The End of All Evil, just the words in that, right? How much passion goes into that. Forecasting humanity, looking at things, reflecting on it. I mean, that right there is passion, and anybody can do it. Nobody, like, if people think, oh, I can't write a book or I can't produce a video, it's like they put themselves down right away. It's totally possible. You first have to believe that it's possible, right? That is freedom within itself. People are not just free physically. They can be not free spiritually or mentally, which is really the roots, right?
Right, enslaved by their own limiting beliefs. Yeah. I wanted to touch back on that point earlier about the return to mother, that freedom term. It really ties beautifully back to what I was saying about the default, because I was thinking earlier after I said that it's similar to nature itself. Nature is the default. That's why we use nature. My definition of nature is that which is not man-made. That which is independent of human creation or influence. And there's a sliding scale too, because there's degrees of influence and all of that, just like there's degrees of freedom. And this is a piece of what I consider to be my holistic worldview, and why, yes, freedom and anarchy are of vital importance, but it's also not the only end all be all. And as you just said, Cory, there's a spiritual factor as well. So that's why I talk so much about animism and paganism, because it's the spiritual aspect. And I view it as spiritual anarchy, because when we speak of anarchy and freedom, 99% of the time we're talking about physical freedom, or freedom from physical slavery, because it's defined through physical force or violence. But again, that's just one layer. And if you're looking at everything from a spiritual perspective, then you certainly can't neglect the spiritual freedom aspect of it. And just for me to describe that, I would say that just as anarchy is sort of physical, or the state of physical freedom, I see animism as the mindset of spiritual freedom. And because it is the default spiritual mindset, just as freedom is the default state before someone gets a mind virus in their head that gets them to justify slavery for whatever reason via moral relativism, animism is the default natural, keyword there, that's the continuous thread through all of these, is natural way of looking at the universe, but not just as an observer, because animism and paganism is about being part of it. You're a participant. You are the universe and nature, and those things are you. So that's why I talk so much, if just equally probably on my channel, about those things, because I would see something like religion as the spiritual equivalent in a way, or parallel to government, physical government, because government is a claim upon your body, and it is based in this false authority, whereas religion is kind of that way. It's this authority of like, and coercion as well, right? You must live this way and do these things and not do these things, or else you'll burn. That's a form of coercion. And so anyway, yeah, I like to look at things very holistically and see how all of these pieces are kind of the same thing, but through the law of correspondence, and natural being the common theme that binds them all together. And that's why I say natural law is that, because natural law is what kind of is the thing that encompasses all of this together, because there's nowhere that natural law doesn't apply. That's what makes it universal. And so when you apply natural law to the physical realm, that's where anarchism comes in. But when you apply it to the spiritual, in my view, there's only one place to land, and that's the animistic mindset of understanding that you're just part of the whole, which is not only the natural world, but a fractal of the God consciousness as well. Which is the same thing. It's all fractals. Nature is fractals. It's you're a part of it. You can zoom in infinitely or zoom out infinitely, and it's all just more of that. It's all nature. That's the unifying vision that I like to apply to everything, because it is universal, and it applies to all things, including the topic that we're specifically touching on here. So that was me just now zooming out of the anarchistic conversation that we're having right now and seeing that same pattern is much bigger than that as well. But it's also not that. It doesn't exclude that.
Well, even what you just said about everyone being part of the whole, it's like then you start, looking inward with that philosophy and saying, why would I want to hurt others? If I'm a part of the whole, I'm just hurting myself. Eventually, that's what it boils down to.
And that reminds me of the one other thing I wanted to say. That's perfect segue to that, because who was that earlier that said, not viewing other people as the enemy? I think that was Cory. It reminded me of one thing that I learned in the Candles in the Dark seminar that I thought probably was my biggest takeaway. I mean, that was an amazing, learning experience. But one of the most profound things that I took away of it was not viewing statists as the enemies, but statism is the enemy. You're almost like a doctor trying to heal someone of a sickness. You can be anti the sickness, but you're actually trying to help the person. You're not like, I don't know, you're not condemning them. You're not looking them as disgusting scum because they've come down with some nasty disease. You wouldn't be there if you didn't care about actually helping the person. I mean, not nowadays with the profit aspect of, but I'm talking about just in an ideal situation, seeing it's like us versus the problem, and the problem is the belief in authority, which is a fucking mind virus, and I can help lead you out of that if I ask the right questions and get you to see the fallacy in your own beliefs. And then you can have that moment of like, you're excited for them because they're actually getting it, and they're kind of coming out of that zombified state, if you will. I just see a lot of egotism and elitism in the freedom circles of like just voters and statists. They're all retards and they're not worth your time even trying to this and that. And there's something to be said about not everyone can be saved. I already said that earlier, but that doesn't mean you have to hate everyone and think that you're better and just look down on everyone else. That's not helping you. It's not helping them. And it's just further creating division, which is what, the powers that should not be are constantly exploiting and counting on that division and those dialectics that they can just manipulate people, and they never turn towards the true enemies.
Wow, good points, man.
Yeah, you don't want to hate on them, but you definitely, with the superstition there, the religion of statism, so to speak, you got to be ready to defend yourself against people that would want to cause you harm. And it's just like, well, you got to be able to do that. That's a really tough call to make. I like what you said there, Logan, about the candles in the dark and what you realized coming away from that. You've learned from that seminar. A lot of what I try to do is try to just communicate to people that these ideas are not novel. And, there was a time where they were rough around the edges and largely ignored. So the polishing process really never took off. but we can start now. We can start today,
That's right.
but we need more people to understand. So instead of like jumping down people's throats and being like, haha, you don't know what I know, therefore I'm like some, superior intellect, and oh, I'm better than you stinky statist. Like, no, it's our job, it's our obligation to teach people, to nurture them into having a better mindset, a more positive mindset, where they can do for themselves with that which they could not do before. And so, I largely try to focus on the logic and reason behind the ideas of anarchism or voluntarism, more specifically, because it's through that you get to actually. I'm not telling you anything. I'm just saying, here's some information. Now you process it. You change your mind. I had to change mine. No one changed mine. Other than me, I did. So you have to do it too. I have no right to change your mind. If I was going to go and try to change your mind for you, I'd be no better than the people I complain about. So that's what we got to do. We got to also, while maintaining being a learner as well, because, truth evolves. It evolves over time. There are certain objective truths that we've already discovered that will never change, but we can learn more. There can be more added to the pile. And so
Sure.
That's what I meant by truth evolving over time.
Yes, there's an irony there. It's like we say truth is always what's here, what it always has been, but it's also something that we use to say it's something to attain. So, there's always nuances in some of this, which is why I did my work on opposites. Um, but I do want to touch on some things. Do you mind about Logan? Some of the things you mentioned, I think they really relevant. And we're hitting about the hour mark, so I'll just try to make it pretty quick. But I think it's relevant to this idea of freedom. Because you're right, it doesn't just stop at anarchism or a free world. There's a spiritual element to this, and it actually relates, of course, to freedom, but it also relates to the emerging artificial intelligence that many people fear about. And that poses its own risks that some are in parallel to which they're the mechanisms of statism and the physical slavery that we're talking about, but there's certain mechanisms that are not the same. And it's just worth noting that what we say is going to certainly evolve in that direction very interestingly. And I have, different things to say about that. But of course, when you mention nature as being an important distinction, of course, that is going to become more relevant over time with the emerging technology and AI. That's why I created Naturosophy. And what you mentioned with like applying it to medicine is what naturopathic medicine is all about, right? They have a whole list of principles, and first, do no harm. The nature is the true teacher, the true healer. So when a doctor helps a patient, they're actually helping their body, nature, because they realize nature has the healing blueprint, right? And the person is just inhabiting that body, but the nature is ultimately what they're working with, and that's what's doing the healing. So it's not the doctor's credit or even the client. Like there is a mutual respect toward nature. And I find it fascinating when you share, about animism and such. What comes to mind is Osho. Like many Americans don't realize we had basically a modern day Buddha in America not even 100 years ago. Now, there's a lot of hit pieces on this guy. And there's a lot of banned footage, documentaries, and stuff. But if you look at his information, right, and the stuff that he had to share, I will tell you it's almost parallel to what we've been sharing. And this was in the 50s and 60s. And of course, you see it with other people like Alan Watts, Terence McKenna. And then all of a sudden, you hit the 80s, you hit Mises Institute. So it's amazing how, with the evolution of technology, these ideas are spreading. And his talks, which, he's long dead now, are getting millions of views. And they're putting out videos on the Osho International channel that's literally like titled "Government is a Mafia and priests are also part of that mafia." Like, they're not hiding it. And there's people who are writing comments about Larkin Rose and some of these other folks. So it's amazing to see that again, there's this emergence of ideas. And one thing I would ask all of you guys on the panel is, are you networking with people local to you? And do you plan on filming that or sharing that with the world? Because that's what I'm trying to do, you know, and I think it's like I said, massively inspirational for me. And I know some of you guys may be in California and that's associated with certain political worldviews. Like I'm in Florida, you know, I'm associated with super right wingers. Doesn't matter. I still find people who care about freedom beyond all the systems. Have you guys networked with different businesses and done anything like that just to share with the viewers and maybe give some expertise?
Well, I do live in New Hampshire, which is the hotbed of
Oh,
liberty
there you
in
go.
this country. The Free State Project is well on their way to really having massive impact on the state legislature, and but more than just that, there's a community, the Free Staters, the Libertarians. There's definitely a community there. I mentioned, I think before we started recording that there's homeschooling co-ops and stuff like that. There's different meetups, weekly meetups,
That's beautiful.
and everything as far
See,
as
people should
filming
know
these.
about that. Now,
Hmm?
why aren't the influencers sharing that, right? The people in the truth media independent sphere, why aren't they bringing people together, helping others network with projects like that? That's, you know, these are the questions that I have for people who already share truth. And this is why I think we need to continue doing outreach, right? But
Hmm.
that's beautiful, man. I love that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on up here in New Hampshire. It's a project, as the name implies, right? As the name says, there's no implication. Fucking project is in the name. So yeah, it's a pretty big movement. A lot of people moving here, changing things. So we'll
Yeah.
see. But a lot of really good people. You mentioned Porkfest earlier. Yeah, if you want to go to a place where you can leave like, $2,000 worth of gold on a table and just like leave for an hour to go watch someone speak and not have to worry about it, you're in the right company. No one's going to take it. People understand the non-aggression principle. They don't like thieves, and everyone's packing. Like it's kind of just a part of the tradition of Porkfest. I mean, we have a lot of liberty up here in this state.
Okay.
Very
Well, if
fortunate.
anybody needs help with networking, like seriously, I'm willing to help anybody out there with networking in their area. I mean, I have lists of strategies and stuff, but if you actually need guidance, finding a local business to partner with, that's a great way to start.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear more from Will before we transition to closing statements and plugs. If
I'm a
Will,
G. Back to mother. No, I was just listening to you guys and you all brought up some really good points. And I was thinking, what am I going to say that's not already being said? And one thing that I've noticed, I mean, it's no secret that there is an uptake of conscious awareness, consciousness itself. There is an uptick. You can call that the age of Aquarius, but what does that really mean? What it really means is that things that were talked about 10, 15, 20 years ago are common knowledge now, even in the esoteric realms, right? There's a lot of people that talk about, negative aspects of government, of the pharmaceutical industry, all these kind of things. The missing component is tying all of that together. And this is something that someone like Larkin or even Mark did for me as I was, scouring the ether webs, devouring knowledge from all different types of arenas. What does it all mean? And bringing it back to the mother, to the matter, to the realm that we are in. It's about the action that we are doing. Cory taking action in his local community. That's great. Bringing it back to what I said earlier about participation. But we need to understand that that philosophical mindset is what connects all the dots, right? You could have all the communities in the world without that philosophical aspect of first principles. I mean, how long will it last? Is it supporting and condoning a control structure or government itself? So it's a state of mind getting back to the basics. And yeah, and so, do something. That's kind of my philosophy. I see a lot of people, you know, with this purist mindset and judging other individuals, but the key component is action. This is what we're here to do in this reality. We incarnate, we act within there. So what's the condition and the capacity that we are acting in? And that's what I would like to see. More people acting in some form or fashion. That may be on a local level, that may be, worldwide. It might be doing a whole variety of things. This is what is part of our essence. We are little C creators. We create things, and we need to activate that.
Will, would you like to plug your work? And
Absolutely.
I'll make sure that for each of you guys, I'm going to make sure that there's a link right in the show notes. So anyone watching this, go click. It's just a click away. How long does it take? Go check out these guys' work. It's phenomenal stuff. There's no shortage of things to learn. Be the learner. Learn your way out. The only way out is through, not around, not above or below, through. And these guys can help you do that. So Will, please. Appreciate
you, brother. Everyone here said some really good points, and I would keep in mind that there's many aspects to it, right? But like, don't negate the health part, the matter. Like, you have to take care of your physical body. If you don't take care of your physical body, then the vessel is going to be, you're not going to get a correct signal. Your mind is going to be off. And, if one falls, the whole system falls as well. So I take a twofold aspect. I would say threefold. The philosophical, talking about the moral aspects. I'm huge on conscious parenting. The parental aspect and child stewardship is what can change the world 100%, because this is the next generation, right? It literally is the future. And then, of course, the health aspect with Logan and I created Ostara Hydrogen, which I highly recommend people go. You can go to my website, willkeller.com, and get to our website. You can get to all my work from there. We have an live event coming up this Sunday. If people want to come check that out, highly recommend it.
And that's Sunday, July 6th.
July 6th.
At what
You
time?
got it. 11 a.m. Pacific.
Okay, so that's 2 p.m. You said 11 a.m. Pacific. That's 2
Correct.
p.m. Eastern.
Yep, you got it.
Cool.
Free knowledge. Come check it out.
And people can find that through willkeller.com.
They can go to willkeller.com. I have an Ostara tab. You can go to webinar.ostarahydrogen.com to
webinar.ostarahydrogen.com. You're breaking up a little bit there, bud.
That's pretty
You
epic.
got it.
Epic robot. That was good.
Sorry, Will, we lost your signal there for a moment.
Robot voice.
It was cool though.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes. It's webinar.ostarahydrogen.com. So thanks for being patient, guys. I'm at the ranch today, so the signal's a little up and down.
A little ranchy.
Oh, good.
A little ranchy.
Yeah, I hear a lot of good things about hydrogen water. So
Ranch dressing. Anyways.
wait, what?
Is that at the Hidden Valley Ranch?
We went from hydrogen water to ranch in a matter of seconds. I'm confused now. All right.
Will's in the Hidden Valley, the valley of the occult. Cory, you're next on the lineup on my screen. So
Okay.
You got a closing statement, and please plug your work.
I'll just share my links. Cory, Nature is the Answer in every platform. Constantly experimenting, going through a lot of different changes and shifts constantly. A lot of things to always figure out, a lot of people to manage and projects to work on. So it's a lot, Sometimes I'm days laid up, not like I'm still doing this work. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now, all day, every day. There's no stop. I do take a lot of breaks, don't get me wrong. Still have fun. Everybody should. But yeah, the past week I was crying a little bit. I had to figure out some things, there's a time for inner work when you're always putting out content, and then there's, time to reflect, and you have to figure out where you want to go, and you want to make sure you're always doing what's true and what's honest. And so, while also trying to make an impact, but it's like for me, it's always about doing what is right first and foremost, right? So, yeah, it's just you meet a lot of amazing people if you network, and I tell you, all sorts of experiences I've had in the past year just being here in Florida. It's been wild. So I welcome everybody to do the same.
We got a website to send people to.
Yeah, I think it should be on the screen. taplink.cc/Cory Health is all my links, but otherwise, theliberator.us, healthrevealed.org, and I don't really share Nita.1, so if people share that, I mean, I guess, but it's old. Nita.1, nita.one. Used to sound like a businessman when I first promoted that. Let's be honest, you guys probably knew that. But when, it's like a movement that was meant to share a lot of these ideas. And I still, uphold a lot of the messages, and I still think a movement could help a lot. But I want people to find their best method of sharing the information. And, if it helps to have a symbol and to have a website where it leads people to information easily, that's what that was created for. Otherwise, the liberator.us is mass collaborative and anybody can join it.
Awesome work. Awesome work. Logan, I got you next, pal. How are you?
I'm happy. Thanks.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a bit like Cory, very multifaceted, and some days feel like a bit of a madman doing too many things and spinning plates all at once, kind of a thing. But my primary, especially in context of this conversation, people are welcome to check out the Wizard Factory. You can go to thewizardfactory.com. Obviously, all my socials are there, primarily focused on YouTube. I've been a little bit slow the past couple of months, actually really been focused on Ostara. So I've been working on the website, planning this webinar that's coming up this weekend and all of that. So of course, Ostara, we also have a podcast there. And of course, definitely come join for the live webinar this weekend, 11 a.m. They already spoke of it. So yeah, webinar.ostarahydrogen.com. We're going to give a good presentation on hydrogen, the many benefits of it, what are our products and the different ways that you can start using it. And very, very amazing and not very well known stuff there in the health world, but it's coming up in a big way, and we're excited to be part of that. Yeah, I guess I can talk about Logan Makes Noise is also just a fun side project where I do silly voices, impressions, music, things like that. Really, though, in the show notes or whatever, we can just put my main link tree that has all my other link trees linked to it. It's a tree of link trees kind of a thing. They all connect. So anyone, whatever that sounds interesting to whoever's listening, check out whatever tickles your fancy. So yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
Well, you're most certainly welcome. We lost Chris.
Just in time to
We can plug his website, right?
Yeah. So Chris Jantzen is the host of the End Evil podcast. Excuse me. You can find all of his work at endevil.life. There'll be a link in the show notes for that. And it's too bad
Also,
because I would have loved
ChrisJanston.com.
Yeah, ChrisJantzen.com. That's good. That's good too. Yeah. And I would have loved to have heard his closing statements because Chris is a very insightful dude. And so
and
he's got a book coming out too.
Yeah.
Oh,
there he is.
Chris is back. Chris is back. Cool.
Hi. Am I coming through still?
Yeah.
Dog stepped on the plug and my whole computer shut off. All the power went off.
Classic excuse.
Okay.
The dog did it.
Well,
you sound like you're at the ranch with me, man.
Sorry about that.
We teamed up and plugged your websites, but please, like, we could never do it as much justice as you could for yourself. So please take it away.
Well, mostly I'm excited about sharing the new tab on my website. Go to endevil.life, and there's now a store tab. And on that store tab, you can get The End of All Evil, which is my favorite book. And as of the 20th, I'm going to have authors' copies of my book, The Book That Changed My Life. And you can pre-order from my store website. I'm really excited to share that. Join the ranks of authors with Cory. And yeah, people can also check out freedomundernaturallaw.com. That's a cool place to check out my work and a lot of these other folks. But yeah, mostly check out endevil.life and check out the book. These books are great tools. And I agree with Cory, networking with other people and in the context of your life, whatever way you can.
Absolutely.
Connect with the source, connect with the divine, connect with natural law, and do that discovery process however you can. But you got to get the principles down, because one thing I've found in my networking situations, you form groups, you get together with people, and then you find out if people aren't really on the same page with principles, it doesn't work out. So you got to really make sure that you get those core first principles down and that the people you're working with are on the same page. And then you can really grow from that foundation. So, and I
Sure.
look to the One Great Work Warriors as a good example of that. So yeah, much love. So good to see you guys all and to catch up. It's been a great talk.
It sure has. All right, guys. I really appreciate all of your participation. I appreciate all of your friendship and all the work that you guys do on your own projects. It's very inspiring. It keeps me going, knowing that I'm not alone. And that's a big thing. A lot of people out there might feel alone. You're not. If you have similar thoughts as this, it's challenging. You might want to talk to somebody about it. You might come across some of this information. You might want to scream from the hilltops, say, "Hey, look at this! Look at this!" I typically call that Paul Revere syndrome. But you got to keep in mind that even on that night where, Paul Revere's ride, as it's called, there was somebody in bed, snuggled up, nice and warm, and they heard Paul coming through town on his horse, screaming, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" Much like some people like to do about the current condition of things out there. And there had to have been somebody that was just laying in bed, wishing that he would just shut the hell up. And thanks for waking me up, Paul. And so we got to be careful. We have to show care toward our fellow person, and realize that everyone's at a different spot in life. Everyone's at a different level, and we got to meet them where they're at, and hopefully just lead them, and by example mostly, and then be there for them when the things start to click and they have questions. We can't force feed people this information. That's a good way to push them away, right back into the arms of the people that really want to control them. Really implore that people start really learning how to think for themselves. Currently, I'm going through a Socratic logic series on my channel. I invite everybody to go over and catch up on that. It's very basic stuff, really, really easy to get to know and to, get along with. It's through this active thinking for ourselves that we get through the bullshit. Like I said, there's no going around or above or under it. We have to get through it. It's been said before. I have no problem repeating those words. So with that being said, I'm James Cordiner. You've been watching Voluntarist Academy. The best news that I could bring this week is that the website is finally back up. Finally, after like 4 months, 5 months almost. No website. Oh my God. The world was ending for me. And then, if you're watching this, you know who you are. You know who you are, the person who helped me do this. And I cannot express my gratitude. I'm really good at speaking, but I can't find the words to express the gratitude that I feel toward you. So thank you very much. And I will catch you guys on the flip side, but always remember before you go, always remember that you own yourself, period. You can't own anyone else rightfully, and you are not the property of anyone else. You've been maybe tricked into thinking that you owe other people things, but you owe them to not harm them. So before I put my foot in my mouth or mess up this nice moment, I wish you guys Godspeed and good night.